Hello there guys, Hirosaki here. This story is all about what if Naruto was a lost soul. The eve after Kyuubi's attack, Konoha is low on strength. The council agrees to turn Naruto into a living weapon. But years later, after Sarutobi's death, will Konoha's weapon continue to defend it? Or will he poise his blade to carve out their throats? Please like and subscribe to this channel before we begin, and check the description box for the author of this great storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 25, Struggle for Kyuubi 1. Jinchiko and Hidetada immediately took up their fighting stances. As the Umbu surrounded them, surprise was evident on their features. Naruto too acted surprised so as not to arouse suspicion from the two swordsmen, unsheathing his two scimitars and taking up a defensive fighting stance. The Mizukage laughed at their plight before looking at his Umbu captain. Finish them. And just like that, the area exploded into action. Naruto stepped to the side to avoid the sword lunge the Umbu behind him attempted, and resisted the urge to just kill him outright. He had to use non-lethal blows until one or both of his missed allies were killed. That would be difficult. After all, instinct was a rather troublesome thing to resist. Instead, he swiveled around on his heel and bashed the ninja in the face with the butt of his sword, shattering the porcelain mask. The Umbu in front of him attempted a horizontal swing to his neck. Naruto batted the blade away with one of his scimitars, opening the Umbu's guard and delivering a solid kick which sent him flying back. He used his other scimitar to block a strike from behind, twisting his arm over his head as he spun around, keeping the blade in place. Once he had fully turned, he used his second blade, and stabbed the man in the foot, causing him to scream in pain and drop the sword. Naruto pushed in until his sword had not only completely gone through his foot, but dug in about 5 inches into the earth. Ignoring the man's cries of pain, Naruto left his blade in his foot and turned, catching another sword in his gauntlet. He pulled him in, and used that sword to block another Umbu's downward swing. The Umbu pulled back his blade and attempted a thrust at Naruto's stomach, but was stopped as the blonde kicked him in the face, and then kicked the other man whose sword he was holding with the same foot in the chest. He used the momentum of his second kick to lean back, grab the sword he had left in the other man's foot, and flip over it. He pulled the blade out and leapt up to the trees as the Umbu were beginning to get their wits back as they chased after him. As he ran, Naruto realized something. If I can lure them away, then I can kill them without Jinchiko or Hidetada realizing it. Then I can return and step in at my leisure. With his plan set, he sheathed his 2 blades and rushed through the forest. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Hinata was not having a good time. The Kiri Kunoichi was faster than her movements wild and untamed in her crazed state, giving her a definite edge over the Hyuga girl. But the Juken, a naturally defensive fighting style, and her Byakugan were keeping her in the fight. She took out 2 kunai and began blocking and or dodging the other girl's strikes. She swerved, ducked and swiveled as she avoided the blows, pushing her reflexes and speed to her limits. She blocked an overhead swing and pushed it over her head. She tried to use her other kunai to stab the girl. Mika avoided it by moving slightly to the side. She then kicked the Hyuga girl in the stomach, sending her stumbling back until she hit a tree. Hinata recovered in time to place her foot against the tree she hit, and use it to leap over Mika, as she lunged at her, stabbing one of her swords into the tree. Hinata, not wanting her to gain her second blade again, threw her 2 kunai while still in mid-air, making the girl step aside, leaving her sword in the tree. When the Hyuga heiress landed, she drew a single kunai and took to the offensive. She came in with a quick swipe with her kunai, which was blocked easily by the girl's remaining sword. Hinata followed up the attack with 3 fast Juken strikes, 1 to the girl's stomach and 2 to her chest. If Hinata was expecting some kind of reaction, it was not what she received. Mika smirked as she coughed up blood. For a moment Hinata truly thought her to be utterly insane, but to the girl's surprise she reared her free hand back, where she caught the barest reflection of light. Ninja wire, but what did she, the sword? Just as the thought entered her mind, the sight of the blade entered the visual range of her Byakugan, the deadly, glinting edge poised to impale her through the chest. It was coming in too fast to dodge. Kaiten! The Hyuga heiress yelled, spinning around as the cyclone of energy exploded outwards, sending both the incoming blade and the Kiri Kunoichi flying. From his place in a nearby tree, Kakashi was very impressed by his student. She knows how to think on her feet. Sometimes in the heat of things you forget your abilities. She's managed to keep a level head throughout the whole thing. Very impressive, Hinata. As the Hyuga heiress ceased her spinning, she barely managed to catch sight of the Kiri Kunoichi before she turned into a puddle of water. Mizu Bushin, but when did she? Mika's form entered visual range of her Byakugan as the girl leapt down from a tree branch above her, her sword raised ready to make the killing blow. Hinata turned in time to catch the girl's wrists as she dived. The Hyuga fell on her back and lifted her legs, placing them on the girl's stomach and, well, kicked, sending the girl clear over her head. Hinata flipped back, her legs now straddling the girl's waist as she lifted her hand and sent a juken strike toward her heart. Mika's smile never faltered and Hinata suddenly found a kunai moving to her chest, towards her own heart. Suddenly the two found their arms held back from killing each other, Hinata's by Guan as the large man held her small wrist with his larger hand while Mika had her arm held back by a certain aburim as his foot pressed against her forearm. That's enough. Guan's deep rumbling voice stilled the two women before he looked to Shino. I will take them to the medics and keep an eye on them, you will accompany me. Copycat, you and the Genjutsu woman, deal with the mop-up. Kakashi looked momentarily taken aback, but let himself drop from the tree as Guan hefted his apprentice to her feet and began making his way to the medics, Hinata and Shino following closely behind. Shino looked at Hinata as she breathed heavily, the adrenaline in her system dying down as the rush faded and her exhaustion made itself known. You handled yourself well, Hinata-sama. The girl jumped slightly at his voice but turned and smiled. Thanks, you cut it a little close though, she said with a mock glare. Shino smirked a little before he turned his eyes ahead once again. Meanwhile Naruto was swiftly rushing through the trees as five shadows moved after him. He slowed his pace, allowing them to overtake him and catch up. Even the fool whose foot he had stabbed, though limping, also caught up. Finally, as he made another leap, one of the Umbu made his move. Their paths would intercept in mid-air. Naruto caught his wrist, stopping him mid-swing and punched him hard, sending him down to the forest floor as he continued his run. Another Umbu attacked, this time, coming directly at him instead of a sideward angle. Naruto realized that he hoped to stab him as he landed on the next tree branch. It may have worked, if he was anyone else. Using some of his wind chakra to adjust his altitude, he was now beneath the branch, so instead of landing on the branch he swung under it, bringing his feet up in a straight rise. He kicked the man in the stomach just as he passed over, knocking the wind right out of him. Naruto released the branch and manipulated his wind chakra to keep moving upwards as he repeatedly kicked the man in the gut. He then used chakra to stick to the man and literally walked around him, and then used him as a platform to leap even higher just as another Umbu came in with a high kick to the area he had once been. However, due to the absence of his presence, the kick connected with the unfortunate Umbu's face, the same one he'd been using as a stepping stool, sending him upwards, towards Naruto. A sphere of spinning chakra formed in his hand before he slammed it into the man's back, eliciting a cry of pain from him as his insides were twisted and shredded to bits as he was sent careening down to the forest floor where he hit with a loud crash and great dust cloud. Naruto didn't have time to enjoy his victory before he had to twist himself in mid-air, as he blocked another Umbu's swipe with kunai. He grabbed the man's forearm, used wind chakra to spin around and sent him crashing into another Umbu about to lunge at him. He continued moving even after he let him go and kicked the fourth Umbu away before replacing himself with him, letting the man get impaled by the last Umbu's blade. 2 down. He turned, facing the 3 remaining Umbu. They each tensed, knowing just by how he had dispatched 2 of their comrades that he was indeed someone to be wary of. Naruto unsheathed one of his blades, the sword glinting in the sunlight, the edges holding a dull red hue, almost as if it was formed by the dried blood of his countless victims that had fallen to its deadly edge. He fell into his familiar stance, the sound of his breathing, hollow and mechanical sounding due to his face mask, sent shivers down their spines. The remaining Umbu, one with a sword, the other two with kunai each spread out surrounding him in a triangle as they took up their stances. "Do you guys need some help?" came a voice from above the trees. The four ninja looked up to find two more mist Umbu standing above them. "Taro, Masaru, what are you doing here?" "Mizukage-sama and the others have the situation under control. Mizukage-sama sent us to see if you needed backup." One of the Umbu spoke as he looked around, seeing the two dead corpses of his comrades. "Apparently you do. If you fools choose to fight, then you will surely die. This will be my only offer. Join me, or suffer the consequences of your resistance." Naruto spoke from his place, making one of the Umbu scoff. "Yeah right, you may have caught us off guard before, but now that we're prepared and Taro and Masaru are here to help us, we'll kill you easily." The Umbu with the sword sneered at the blonde before he vanished, using speed that was very impressive, even by Umbu standards, as he reappeared a few feet behind the blonde. He smirked in satisfaction as he turned, expecting to see the Konoha nin shaking in fear, but was instead rewarded by his sword splitting in half, as if it had been cut. He actually cut the sword? But I never even saw him move. So be it? Naruto's voice brought the startled Umbu out of their shock. "Since you worthless fools are so eager to throw your lives away." He spoke as he unsheathed his second blade as blue chakra began to seep from him, before it exploded in a bright pillar of blue like flames. One of the Umbu that had just arrived swiftly unsheathed his sword before rushing at the blonde, the other four following his example after just a moment of hesitation. Naruto leapt high into the air, going above the tree line in a single leap. The first Umbu wearing a sparrow's mask caught up, his sword raised over his head, ready to bring it down on the Konoha Jinchuriki. The next thing he knew, the blonde had punched him square in the face without even turning to face him, and he was plummeting back down to the forest floor. The second, wearing a panther's mask, followed suit, leaping from one of the trees. He lunged at the Jinchuriki, rearing his blade back before he thrust, only to have the Konoha nin somehow flip over his attack. Naruto manipulated his wind chakra to right himself before he delivered a powerful, crushing axe kick which connected at the man's right collarbone. A silent scream of pain came from his mouth as he plummeted down to the forest floor, joining his comrade. The next one, wearing a lizard's mask, was next. Naruto simply vanished from his location, reappearing behind the man, and then used him to jump a bit higher, letting him take the blow of the bear-masked Umbu that tried to deliver a haymaker from behind. The bear-masked Umbu looked up in time to get stomped in the face by the Jinchuriki, sending both him and his lizard-masked partner down. On the way, his kunai pouch opened, scattering the metallic projectiles all around the descending blonde. The last Umbu wearing a boar's mask never even had a chance. When he was in striking distance, the blonde replaced himself with one of the scattered kunai. She turned to face him and threw one of her own kunai, only to have him replace himself again. He turned and barely had time to catch a glimpse of red and black before he vanished again. The blonde vanished and reappeared so quickly it looked as if he was everywhere, as he didn't even use the smoke clouds. In the end, the boar-masked individual was so dizzy she couldn't even put her guard up as the blonde reappeared in front of her, slightly higher than where she was before he delivered another axe kick, sending her also crashing into the forest floor. Naruto descended, breaking through the tree line. Not a moment after he did, though, the sparrow-masked Umbu lunged at him again. Naruto twisted himself in mid-air, dodging the man's lunge. Apparently, he was trying to simply shoot past him as he cut him, but Naruto had other plans as he caught the man's ankle and pulled him back. He felt the air leave the sparrow-masked Umbu's lungs as he punched him in the stomach. Hard. The man coughed and wheezed as he tried to force air back into his chest. The blonde showed no mercy as he delivered an uppercut, followed by the blonde manipulating his wind chakra to do a front flip in midair, and then delivering another downward kick to the man's head, sending him head first down to the forest floor. Again, he felt the panther-masked Umbu's presence. The lizard-masked Umbu also approached him from the other side. He turned and backhanded the panther-masked Umbu, sending him flying, and then simply placed his foot, letting the lizard-masked Umbu's face connect on its own as the man couldn't move to stop his own momentum. The bear-masked Umbu tried to jump down from one of the trees in order to catch the blonde by surprise. But the blonde again manipulated his wind chakra and moved out of the way, letting the bear-masked Umbu strike the disoriented lizard Umbu, who was in a simple free fall, sending him down to join the still wheezing sparrow. Naruto then put both hands together, his sword still firmly in his grip, before he brought them down and hit the bear-masked Umbu in the back of the neck with the sickening snap slash. Naruto spread out his arms, his two swords igniting with his two chakra elements as he raised them and swung down. Gokakusatsu! Hell's tormenting flames, he yelled as both flame and wind mixed and exploded, blanketing the forest floor in fire. The three Umbu barely had time to scream. "No!" A scream came to his right as the boar-masked Umbu rushed him, intent on avenging her comrades. Naruto stood on the tree branch, the embers of the roaring flames slightly lifting the shadows that veiled his face, making the Umbu freeze as she met the gaze of her opponent. Those cold sea blue eyes, empty and void of all emotion. Eyes of a machine, one that had killed thousands and caused suffering to millions. Eyes of something much worse than any demon. "What monstrosity are you?" was her whisper before the demon of Konoha struck, his scimitar impaling the Kiri ninja straight through the stomach. She gasped and coughed as he clutched the blade, hoping to stop it from going in further. No such luck. The blonde suddenly pulled up, opening the woman's navel. Blood gushed out like a fountain as she gasped and fell forward. The blonde removed his blade, turned and left her to bleed out, intent on finding the last Umbu. He found the sparrow-masked individual, picking himself up. Apparently, his last flight through the trees had broken his arm, sprained an ankle, and probably broken a rib or two. Naruto walked forward and scented the fear rolling off the individual in waves as he began dragging himself back as fast as he could. Pathetic. The blonde inwardly sneered before he knelt down and grabbed the man by his throat, lifting him up and slamming him against the tree. Shifted the sword in his grip and ready to deliver the final blow. "Plea. Plea." The plea was cut off harshly as his sword cut through the man's throat. Naruto pulled the blade out and resheathed it. He watched as the man's lifeblood seeped out of him. He gurgled a few times before he finally slumped over dead. The blonde turned and left, heading back to the two allies he had left behind. Chapter 26, Struggle for Kiri PRT, Two Burden of Sorrow. Naruto watched with a bored gaze as Jinchiko and Hidetada fought the remaining 5 Umbu. 3 lay dead at their feet. They fought back to back, not allowing their Umbu counterparts to separate them too much. The Mizukage watched with thinly veiled glee as the two began to tire, as was shown by heavy breathing and sloppier attacks. They both had excellent teamwork, he acknowledged. No doubt what had gotten them this far, but still, they wouldn't last much longer. Once they fell, he would step in, defeat this weakling of a Kage, and seize Kiri as he meant to do so. Finally, one Umbu broke the melee, and leapt back, forming his hand seals. He called out his jutsu. "Suitun, Suryuden." He yelled as he blew out a stream of water, which quickly formed into the water dragon. Jinchiko and Hidetada snapped their heads in its direction. Acting on instinct, the two leapt in the first direction their legs took them, away from each other. The attack had worked. As soon as they hit the ground, the two realized their mistake and tried to reach each other, only to have the 5 Umbu block their path. Jinchiko cursed. They had wanted to avoid this for 2 reasons. The first is because now they were separated, making it easier for the enemy to surround them, therefore kill them, and second is because in order to avoid them getting surrounded they would have to use jutsu, not something you wanted to do if you had to face the Kage of a nation right after. The only female member of the 7 swordsmen cursed as she was forced to leap back again due to various explosive tags being thrown at her feet. When she landed again, she formed her hand seals without ever releasing her sword before she swung, dragging the tip of the blade on the ground. Raitun, Doki no Ten. Yellow streaks of lightning exploded from the attack, snaking through the earth, leaving a jagged trench as it released electricity everywhere. One of the Umbu formed his hand seals. Suitun, Suijin Hiki, he yelled, slamming his hands on the earth, letting the lightning streaks hit it. The lightning was naturally drawn to the water, reducing the attack to barely nothing when it reached them. Jinchiko narrowed her eyes as two of the Umbu charged her, their two blades glinting in the light. Fools trying to beat one of the 7 swordsmen in Kenjutsu. She thought, somewhat insulted as she took up her stance. She backpedaled as she blocked the first and second strikes, nearly diverting their attacks. When she had led the two on enough, so that they fell into a subconscious state of believing she would merely divert their attacks, she dug her heels in harshly. This time she didn't divert the attack, she blocked both completely, knocking them both off balance as they stumbled slightly. She did a quick roundhouse kick, nailing the first one in the face as she continued the motion by smoothly slicing the other's chest armor. She had aimed for his neck, but he had managed to recover quicker than what was anticipated and leaned back, avoiding the deadly blade, somewhat. She snarled as she went to start her hand seals again when she heard a scream behind her that made her blood run cold. She snapped her head in the direction of the scream and saw Hidetada, with a kunai jabbed into his right side, most likely where the kidneys were. Behind him, holding the knife, was none other than the Mizukage, wearing a cruel smirk as he shrugged innocently. I got bored. She felt her anger rise as she grits her teeth hard and rushed at him. The two Umbu behind her ran to catch up, while the two in front of her moved to intercept her path. Raitun, Chuseki no Doki. She yelled as she crossed her arms in front of her. Lightning encased her form, making her look like a comet running along the ground. The two Umbu leapt over her to avoid being hit by the jutsu. She dispelled it once she saw her path was clear, and leapt up as she raised her sword, lightning dancing and crackling around it. If you attack me, you'll kill him too. The Mizukage yelled out to her. Her eyes narrowed and grew cold as she swung anyway, the streaks of lightning flying from her sword to the ground below like a shower of electricity. The Mizukage leapt away as the lightning fell. To his surprise, the lightning fell around Hidetada and the location where he himself would have been. It appears she had been bluffing. Before he could do anything, Jinchiko landed near Hidetada, picked him up, and leapt through the trees, vanishing into their shadows. After her, he barked. Don't you dare let her escape. He yelled angrily. His Umbu nodded before they rushed after the female swordsman. Naruto watched as she ran before he silently followed, always in the shadows. Come on, damn it. Don't you dare die on me, you hear me, you worthless moron. Jinchiko said as she carefully examined the injury. It was deep, very deep. It spurted blood every few seconds and truly looked fatal. He chuckled, ignoring the blood that rose into his mouth. You seem awfully worried over this worthless moron, he said, chuckling before he coughed lightly. Just shut up, she said as she rummaged through her pouch for her first aid equipment. He halted her search as he placed a hand on her wrist. She looked to him surprised before he waved her off. Don't act foolish, Jinchiko, my time's up, we both know it. Get out of here while you still can. She growled angrily as she continued rummaging through her pack. You're a moron, a delirious one at that, so just shut up and let me work. He grabbed her wrist again, stopping her. Jinchiko, please, he whispered hoarsely. She stopped in her attempts. She bit her lip hard as she forced the tears back. Naruto watched the scene from above, his speed and greater sense of smell making it very easy for him to find the two before their pursuers. She sighed in agitation, masking the pain she felt for her dying friend. Damn you, she whispered harshly. Hidetada smiled at her harsh tone. Promise me one thing, Jinchiko. What's that? She asked, her voice going softer as she closed her eyes. Promise me that you'll live beyond this day. So. He paused as he coughed blood. That you can fulfill our dream. Since I won't be able to help you. She smiled softly down at him. You're still hooked up on that dream of yours. Ever since Sensei put it in your head. He smiled and nodded. Damn straight. He said, coughing more blood as he slowly moved his hand to grasp her own. Naruto watched the display with cold apathy. Not even fazed by the man's dying words and increasingly laboring breath. He sensed the presence of the Umbu approaching. Soon, it would all be over. Promise me, Jinchiko, promise me that you'll live and bring peace to Kiri. Bring peace to our land. Naruto stopped, taken aback by the request. Remembering the Sandame's last words to be almost the exact same thing. Did this man and Sarutobi share the same dream? He was brought out of his musings as the stinging smell of salt reached his nose. He looked down to Jinchiko's silently shaking form. She was struggling to hold back the tears. It was then he noticed that Hidetada was no longer in the world of the living. She was a good kunoichi, Naruto conceded as she took steady breaths in order to calm her emotions, recognizing that now was not the time for it. Naruto was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he didn't even see the kunai that approached her until it was too late. Judging by her scream of pain, neither did she. The blade hit her left shoulder. Blood seeped from the wound freely as she pulled the weapon out with a grunt of pain. Naruto debated whether or not he should interfere. In the end, he decided to hold his position for a while longer. Jinchiko stood, holding her injured shoulder as she turned and glared at her attackers, the Mizukage and his 5 remaining Umbu. How careless of you, Jinchiko, I merely intended that to be a warning shot. She cursed as she threw the bloodied knife at him. He caught it between his thumb and forefinger easily as he smiled down at her, savoring this moment for all it was worth. Kill her, he said simply, and the Umbu at his side immediately sprang into action. She held her sword in a defensive stance as best she could with her injured shoulder. Hidetada, I can't promise I'll live beyond this day, but... She paused as she looked up to the Mizukage's smug face. Maybe killing him will make your dream of a peaceful Kiri a reality, she said with hints of determination in her voice. Naruto watched her. Something about her stance had changed, whereas before there was defiance, anger and a bit of fear, now there was only resolve and acceptance. Of what? Her death, perhaps? Then what was the resolve he sensed? The desire to take them with her? He let his eyes travel to the still form of Hidetada. The man simply lay there, his expression, one of peace, yet also an underlying sadness in his features. Does she fight for him, perhaps, to fulfill your last request? Request? Just as I fight to fulfill Sarutobi-sama's final command? He again let his eyes travel to the Kiri kunoichi. Or is it something else? He was brought out of his musings as Jinchiko began to glow bright yellow. Then electricity cut through the air around her form, encasing her in a high-voltage field of chakra. This technique, she is consuming her bioelectric energy. If she keeps this up, she will most certainly die soon. Jinchiko glared at her attackers, the Umbu having ceased their charge at the sight of her technique. For a moment, all was still until one of the Umbu took the initiative and formed his hand seals. Suiton, Suiryuden no Jutsu, he yelled as he gathered the moisture from the surrounding mist. Using water against lightning was always dangerous. It had a 50-50 chance that it would work or backfire terribly. It all depended on which attack held more chakra. When the dragon hit the field of electrical chakra, it simply exploded, scattering the small droplets of water everywhere. Jinchiko used the minor distraction and shot forward. Her lightning-encased form appearing as nothing more than a yellow streak as she headed straight for the Mizukage. Doton, Dwaryuhiki, another Umbu, yelled as he slammed his hands onto the ground. A wall of solid rock came between her and the Mizukage. She didn't stop, and simply tore through it like a wrecking ball through a building. She kept moving, her gaze set determinedly onto her target. The Mizukage sneered as she neared him. The high voltage seeped into the air, making his skin tingle and his fingertips sting. He began forming his hand seals. Attack, destroy her now. He yelled out his order, causing his bodyguards to form their own hand seals as they flanked him. Naruto watched as earth, fire, lightning and water techniques were launched at the charging woman in rapid succession. They each seemed to bounce off the field of electrical energy as she charged straight through them. To most, she appeared unstoppable. But Naruto could see and smell traces of charred flesh, hear the snapping of bones, and the tearing of muscle and tissue. For a brief moment her charge faltered, before she pushed through with even more vigor. Why? He wondered as he continued to stare. What is it that makes you fight so hard? Is it Hidetada? Or perhaps you are the same as those others. He mused to himself. You took his place, why? Haku coughed up blood, staining the gray floor of the bridge red. Because. He rasped out. He is someone I would protect, at any cost. Even your own life? Haku nodded and smiled at the taller blonde. Why? The feminine boy let out a small laugh. You'll have to learn for yourself. That was the first time he had ever seen something of that nature, and it confused him still. What was it that compelled that Kiri-Nuknin to surrender his own life for Zabuza? Kill me instead. He remembered the girl from Suna. She had cried out to him, begging for him to spare her brother. Even offering herself in his place, practically throwing herself in front of his blade. What was it about these individuals? What gave them such drive to simply surrender their lives heedlessly? He let his eyes travel to Hidetada again. What causes these people to do this? Meanwhile the Mizukage and his Umbu had just finished another volley of jutsu, and still Jinchiko's charge didn't stop. The Mizukage glowered and was about to leap up in order to get out of the way, but nearly lost his balance as his legs kept themselves firmly planted on the ground. Well, what the? I can't move. But how did she? He paused in his thoughts as looked to his feet, seeing many small electric strings holding him in place. But how? No one can manipulate lightning to such an extent. How did she? He paused as he realized that the lightning was coming from small water droplets, the droplets that had spread around the area from the water dragon used earlier against her. She was using the small reserves of her chakra in the droplets to manipulate the lightning now holding him in place. It wouldn't hold long, but long enough for her to reach him. His Umbu leapt out of the way, not noticing that their leader was stuck, leaving him alone. He made a move to form more hand seals, but it was too late. She picked up speed. The ball of lightning slammed right into him. He barely had enough time to scream before he was engulfed in the ensuing blast. Naruto and the Umbu each covered their eyes from the bright light and braced against the harsh winds. When it finally died down, the sight that greeted them was a burnt, very dead Mizukage. Jinchiko stood over him. Her arms and legs were damaged badly, blood seeped from her mouth, indicating internal bleeding. Her heartbeat was erratic at times, beating dangerously slow, and then speeding up dramatically. Her entire body was twitching badly as she fell to her knees and threw up, vomit and blood mixed as her sword fell to the floor with a dull clattering sound. All the while Naruto observed, his gaze focused intently on her. He suddenly caught the smell of salt. She was crying. Possibly from regret that she did not try to escape, or that she was dying, he expected. But what she said next surprised him. At least, I managed to keep part of my promise. I'm sorry, Hidetada. Her thoughts slowed as she collapsed on her side, her breathing becoming shallower and shallower as her heart suddenly stopped. She had used up so much bioelectricity that her brain could no longer send messages to her body enough to keep her conscious. But Naruto could see from his perch that her features were not sad or angry, but rather happy. She was smiling. Despite everything, and even the pain she must be in, she was still smiling. What causes you to smile this way, Jinchiko? What is it that allows you to do so? The remaining Umbu leapt down, the captain of the group approaching with his sword ready to make sure she was dead. He raised his sword, but that's about as far as he got before his head was neatly chopped off and the woman vanished. The other Umbu tensed and turned as they sensed a presence. They found Naruto standing there, one hand holding his blade while the other held Jinchiko under one arm. "Leave now, and I will spare your lives." Each of the Umbu spared each other a glance before they decided to simply cut their losses and leave. Naruto lowered his blade and spared a glance at the woman slung under his shoulder before he set her down on the floor. She lay on her back as Naruto placed his hand over her chest. He closed his eyes and focused for a moment. This was one of the few medical techniques that he knew. He usually just used it to preserve the life of a prisoner. He realized with some small sense of irony that this was the first time he would use it to save a life just for the sake of saving it. He sent a jolt through her system, trying to jump-start her heart again. He sensed no change in her pulse, so he did it again. Again nothing. He did it a third time and heard her pulse. He listened for a moment and heard her breathing. It was shallow and unsteady. If she was to survive, then he had to get her to the medics. With this thought in mind, Naruto sheathed his blade, picked her up and rushed back to camp. It was several hours later that the demon of Konoha found himself waiting in front of a medic tent, where they were currently treating the woman he had saved. He didn't even know why he saved her. Was it curiosity? Was it because her death would have been a waste? He didn't know really, but he had saved her, and yet, as he continued to replay the events over and over in his mind, a dull ache grew in his chest. The tent parted, revealing one of the curing medics as she wiped her brow. "She'll be fine. But we'll have to stay in bed for several weeks before she can do any strenuous action." Naruto nodded. "Very well. Inform me when she wakes." The woman nodded and bowed before she went to her other duties. Naruto looked to the setting sun. Its dull orange hue setting the sky ablaze with its light. He turned and left. He needed to think. Kakashi looked over the battlefield. Many ninja lay dead or dying, some groaning in pain while others cried in agony. A relief force had arrived. Earlier, they were meant to be used as backup in case things went wrong, but now, they were in charge of mop-up. The Kiri ninja walked around, trying to find survivors from either side. Various cries calling for medics could also be heard among the chaos. He sighed. "This is war." He mumbled to himself as he rubbed his covered Sharingan. "I had almost forgotten what it was like." He muttered as he looked to the sky. "I guess I'll have plenty of time to get used to it again." He sighed again as he turned to leave. But stopped as he caught sight of Naruto, walking among the bodies as he too surveyed the battleground. He stared curiously as Naruto just walked past and entered the forest, seemingly unfazed by the gruesome display before him. He sighed and looked to the setting sun. "Minato-sensei, I wonder what you would do." Naruto stopped at the edge of the clearing. Hidetada lay there, in the same place as before. His blood pooled around him, coating the grass a deep shade of brown. He walked over to him and simply stared at his still form. The ache in his chest grew almost uncomfortably. He placed a hand over his chest and wondered what it was. "It is called guilt, Naruto-sama." Naruto turned to the voice and found the Aburame clan head as he emerged from the forest. The blonde was only slightly surprised at his presence there. But then his words caught up to him. "Guilt, you say? And just why should I feel guilty over his death, Shibi?" he questioned. His voice a slow, bored drawl. "Leaving both him and Jinchiko alive was simply too dangerous. I did what I had to do." Shibi adjusted his glasses and nodded. "Yes, you did, Naruto-sama. You did everything that you were supposed to do. But, you still feel guilty, and naturally so." "Naturally so?" the blonde questioned. Shibi walked around the clearing, his hands clasped behind him. "Naruto-sama, you are a person that has dealt death. Your hands are stained with blood and much of it, but you do not understand it." He paused as he turned to look at the boy. Today, you witnessed what death truly is. You saw her suffering, not just the fear or the anger you have normally witnessed, but her true suffering. Naruto's eyes narrowed. I suggest, Shibi, that you keep your insects off of me. He warned, quickly deducing the source of the man's knowledge. Did you know? Shibi ignored him as he continued speaking. That after the Great Shinobi War, Sarutobi and Yondaime-sama were in the perfect position to take full control of IWA? Do you know why they did not seize that opportunity? Naruto said nothing as he listened. Because neither of them wished to bear the weight of that guilt. Conquering IWA would only bring destruction, it would only bring more sorrow, and neither of them wanted to bear that burden. He paused as he turned to face the blonde. You merely feel the beginning of that burden. Are you sure you wish to shoulder this thing that will undoubtedly become only all the greater? Even to one such as yourself, with this undertaking, Naruto-sama? Naruto listened, and thought over what was just said to him. He squared his shoulders as he formed his hand seals. Katan Gokaku, he whispered before he breathed a stream of flame, incinerating the Kiri Jounin. He stared at the flames for a long while, listening to the cracks, and losing himself in their glow. He looked to the Aburame clan head. This is a land at war, a world where demons fight. If I must become a demon to end the chaos, then a demon is what I swear to be, and I will shoulder whatever burden that comes with it. He spoke with determination before he turned and left. If I must, then I alone will shoulder the sorrow. Chapter 27, Slug vs. Fox. Jinchiko groaned as she blearily opened her eyes. The bright lights of the hospital room pained her, and caused her vision to blur. As she placed a hand to block out the harsh glare. I see you finally returned to the world of the living. She groaned and weakly turned her head, catching sight of the familiar figure in green. Guan? She questioned quietly. Where am I? In the hospital. I thought that would be obvious. He said as he stood and walked over to the table by her bedside. He poured water into a cup and gently lifted her head as he brought it to her lips. Drink, was his simple command. She complied, drinking the whole glass very quickly. Guan placed the cup back on the table and walked back to his seat. How did I get here? She asked after a few moments of silence. That Uzumaki boy was the one who brought you in. Apparently he managed to arrive just as you collapsed. He answered. She turned incredulously to him. What? But they sent 7 Umbu after him. She said incredulously. Guan nodded. Indeed, each of them were also part of our former Mizuki's personal guard. He looked to her then. And he escaped without a single injury. That's impossible, not even you could do that. The only person who would have a chance at doing that would be Kisame. Guan nodded. The boy is powerful, remarkably so. Possibly stronger than even Kisame ever could be. You've got to be kidding me? Kisame was the strongest ninja ever to grace Kiri since the Shodaime Mizuki. What could possibly make you think that? You would be quite impressed by the information one could gather by simply remaining in the shadows. He took a breath. He is apparently a Jinchuriki. What demon he houses I do not know. He was raised as a weapon from a very young age, and took over the hidden leaf when the Sandaime Hokage died. He finished and stood as he began walking towards the door. Guan? Jinchiko called behind him, making him pause. I'm sorry, you and Hidetada never did get along, but he was still your brother and... Jinchiko. He interrupted firmly. Just, tell me, what were his final words? She closed her eyes and smiled somewhat sadly. He asked me to fulfill his dream, you know, that old one our sensei stuck in his head. Really? Guan asked as his interest piqued. Interesting. How so? She asked. I don't assume you know why this Jinchuriki wants Kiri for himself, do you? For our land and our navy, which now controls practically the entire Eastern Sea. That may be what he told you, but no, the real reason he wants Kiri is because he wishes to unify the land, to conquer every hidden village. What? But that's ludicrous. She yelled, but winced as spasms of pain ran through her body. Do you know why he wants to do this? She didn't speak. It was the last request of the Sandaime Hokage. She scoffed. Last I heard the Sandaime was a peace-loving old man. Guess I heard wrong. The Sandaime's last wish was to bring peace to the entire land that stopped the woman cold. Not just Konoha, or Kiri, but the entire land. He wants to end all of the wars. Guan paused. Therefore, in a way, serving this boy will help in fulfilling my brother's dream. He looked back over his shoulder at her. You can make your choice, whether to serve him or defy him, but I think I've already made mine, Jinchiko. Meanwhile, Naruto sat in a meditative position in one of the many spare rooms of the Kage residence. After the Mizuki's death, it only took one day to subdue the entire village of Kiri. A few insurgents and loyalists to the old regime had been driven out and had taken up refuge in the surrounding marshlands, but Mika, Hinata and Shibi would deal with them soon enough. Now all he had to do was remain in the area for a few days to firmly secure his place in the seat of power. He would assign Kakashi and a few Umbu to be the overseers. Keeping a reputable Jounin presence here would work well to keep any power-hungry fool in line. He was broken out of his thoughts as soft thumps reached his ear. He looked to the side and saw a frog hopping towards him with a scroll on his back. A message from Jiraiya. The frog plopped itself down in front of him, untied the scroll from his back, placed it on the floor, waved once and poof. Was gone. Naruto blinked before he grabbed the scroll and unrolled it. So, he drawled. The slug and toad are coming to the mist. He paused for a moment, as if contemplating something. I wonder, Tsunade, what is it that you desire? It was 3 days later that Jiraiya and Tsunade finally arrived in Kiri. They could have arrived much sooner, but for some reason Tsunade had insisted to simply walk at a normal pace and take plenty of rests. Every time Jiraiya questioned her, she simply said that it had been a while since she had come around these parts and wanted to enjoy the scenery. When they finally arrived in Kiri, the two immediately noticed two things. Repairs were underway on many buildings and Hatake Kakashi was standing as the gate guard. You have got to be shitting me? Jiraiya and Tsunade muttered to themselves. It had merely been 5 weeks. There was no conceivable way that he could have subdued Kiri already. Ah, Jiraiya-sama, Tsunade-sama. Kakashi greeted lazily as he waved, never removing his eye from his book. Naruto-sama has been expecting you. He spoke as he turned a page. Jiraiya nodded, still slightly dumbfounded. Ah, Kakashi, where is Naruto now? He should be in the tower, beginning his administrative duties. Jiraiya blinked with an expression of disbelief mixed with a kind of holy shit look before he turned to Tsunade. Well, let's get going, now's a good time as any. She nodded, and the two remaining Sannin entered the village of Kiri. When Tsunade and Jiraiya entered the tower, they didn't even bother to speak to the administrative workers as they made a beeline for the strongest chakra source in the building. They entered the Mizuki's former office and found Naruto speaking to a large man wearing green robes. Very well, Guan. The man bowed his head once before he turned and walked past the Sannin. As he passed Tsunade, however, his eyes shifted. She looked at him from the corner of her eyes and caught his gaze. His gaze was completely blank as he walked past her without a single word. Ah, Jiraiya. Naruto's hollow voice brought her out of her muses. She turned her eyes onto him, blood-red robe and hood, armor as black as midnight and metallic face mask. His voice dead, hollow and void of any emotion. His eyes hidden in as much shadow as the rest of his being. Her eyes narrowed. This was the man Jiraiya believed would bring peace to the world? She was brought out of her contemplation by Jiraiya's voice. And so, she agreed to come here and meet with you. I see. Naruto spoke as he turned to her. Well then Tsunade, you wish to speak, so speak. She squared her shoulders. I would like some privacy for this conversation, why don't we go someplace else? She seemed to think for a moment. As a matter of fact, I know the best place. You do? Jiraiya questioned. She smirked as she turned to him. You know the place too, Jiraiya, it's where we camped out during our first mission here. Jiraiya said as he remembered and nodded. Only one question, Tsunade. I was told you had an assistant, Shizune was it? Where might she be? Tsunade shrugged. She didn't want to come, and decided to wait for me back at the village Jiraiya found us in. If I decide to join you then I'll call her. Naruto paused and after a long moment nodded. Very well then, let us leave. The three walked through the village, watching as the people worked. Tsunade caught many looks of fear pass over the villagers' faces as they laid eyes on Naruto, as well as some looks of anger from others dressed in black garb, no doubt families burying their loved ones. She closed her eyes. The three continued their walk until finally they came to a clearing overlooking a small 10-foot rock face. Tsunade walked over to a tree which had 4 names carved into it. Jiraiya had done it. Jiraiya, Tsunade Orochi team and their sensei Sarutobi. Greatest ninja team ever. She closed her eyes and looked to the sky with a slightly pained expression on her features. How did it come to this? Hee, I remember that. Jiraiya's voice brought her out of her thoughts. She turned and looked at her teammate's bittersweet expression. She smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. Jiraiya sensed her tense and turned to look at her. Suna he was cut off by her whisper. I'm sorry. He tried to pull back, but it was too late. She tightened her grip on him and spun him around so his back was facing her. She charged some chakra into her fingertips and taped the base of his neck before she delivered a solid kick to his ribs, sending the Sannin flying, crashing right into a tree. She closed her eyes and prayed that she hadn't hit too hard before she turned to look at the blonde Jinchuriki, who seemed as impassive as ever at Tsunade's actions. She sneered at that. Bastard probably doesn't even care. What is it that you desire, Tsunade? He questioned simply. She scoffed. To stop you in your idiocy right here and now. He shook his head as he unsheathed one of his swords. No, Tsunade, what is it that you truly desire, the desire hidden in the dark pit of your soul? 2 figures leapt down from the rock face, revealing Akina and Shizune as they flanked the Jinchuriki, both bearing kunai and shuriken. Jiraiya struggled to stand, but that tap to the neck had completely messed up his nervous system. He couldn't move properly. Damn it, that's why she wanted to walk. She wanted for them to get here first and be ready to ambush him. I should have seen this coming. Naruto craned his head to look at Shizune. The woman held a determined gaze, but there was a definite underlying fear and nervousness. She may know what to do, but this was probably one of her first true combat experiences. He then turned to the other uninvited guest, Akina. The girl looked at him with a hatred he had not seen in any before her. Possibly even more than Sasuke's hatred for Itachi. It was then that he locked eyes with her and time seemed to freeze as his eyes flashed red without his consent. Unbeknownst to anyone, Kyuubi smirked from behind the bars of his cage. Yes. He began chuckling then, at first slow and menacing, then blowing up into a mad laugh of bloodlusting glee. His red eyes glowed in the darkness of the seal. Soon, Naruto, soon I'll feel your bones crunching between my teeth. Once I'm done with you, not even the Shinigami will find the pieces. One who betrays must expect betrayal. Naruto spoke lazily before he snapped his fingers. A massive broadsword flew through the air, making both girls leap back to avoid it. Before the sword could hit a tree, an individual in green caught the blade by the hilt. Guan, you deal with those two, I will deal with Tsunade. The bearded man nodded before he adjusted his grip on the blade and began walking towards Shizune and Akina. The blonde girl appeared to want to go after Naruto, but held herself back in favor of helping Shizune. Naruto walked forward as his sword glinted in the flickering sunlight that filtered down through the treetops. Red chakra pooled at his feet and encased his form its fiery embrace as his eyes glowed a deep red beneath his hood. "If my death is what you desire, Tsunade, then you'll have to come and take it." She sneered at him. "I don't know if you can even be called a man or if you really are a demon anymore, Uzumaki. But even if you are a demon, it doesn't matter. I'll do whatever I have to do to stop this ambition of yours here and now." Naruto stopped and felt an unfamiliar feeling of anger bubbling in his chest. For some reason, being called a demon irritated him. For what reason, he did not know. People had said it, both in and out of the battlefield, for as long as he could remember. He never cared then, why should he now? He then remembered Hidetada. That gripping pain in his chest as he stared at his unmoving form. Perhaps that was why. Because before, he cared for nothing. He could kill, maim, murder, it didn't matter. But now for the first time in his life he had felt guilt, true guilt over his actions. Demons did not feel guilt, therefore, he could not be one. He looked into her eyes, his blood-red orbs seemingly piercing her. "I'll let you in on a secret, Tsunade. Uzumaki Naruto is nothing but a man." And with that quiet declaration the blonde rushed the slug Sannin. Chapter 28, Awakening. Tsunade reared her fist back, and with a display of her superhuman strength she punched Naruto's incoming sword, shattering it into a million pieces. Naruto took it in stride as he used the swing to gain momentum to spin around and deliver a roundhouse kick to the slug Sannin. Tsunade blocked the kick with one arm and pushed him off. Naruto, who had been moving in a clockwise motion, now moved counterclockwise. He brought his foot down harshly, digging it into the gravel to stop his momentum as he charged a fist with so much chakra it glowed with blue flames as he slammed it into her gut, using the momentum to add to the impact. Tsunade felt the air leave her lungs painfully quick, but held her ground and delivered her own punch to the boy's face. Naruto quickly moved an arm to block as best he could, but she broke through his defense like a wrecking ball through plaster as she hit his jaw dead on the spot. Naruto flew through the air several dozen yards and through a tree before he was able to right himself in mid-air and land on the next tree with his legs. The wood groaned against the pressure of his impact. He used the tree to jump, bounding over the tree tops as he formed his hand seals. Before he cupped his hands in front of his face and breathed out a massive stream of flames towards the woman. Tsunade reared back her fist and punched the ground. The shockwave of her fist made the earth rise in front of her in massive spikes which blocked the flames. When the orange glow died down indicating the attack had finished, she kicked each earth spike / shield, sending them flying towards the airborne Jinchuriki. Naruto unsheathed his last blade and began swinging, sending multiple wind blade to cut the stones into small pebbles before they even reached him. As the last stone approached him, he used his wind chakra to spin him around, giving him momentum as he kicked the stone back to her. Only to have it shatter into a million pieces as Tsunade reared back her fist and punched it. "Ha!" was Shizune's cry as she appeared behind the man in green, coming down with a brutal axe kick to the junction of his neck and collarbone. Juan took the blow without so much as a flinch before he grabbed the girl by her ankle and swung her around, slamming her into Akina, who had been approaching his side, intent on stabbing him in the ribs with a kunai. Both girls were sent flying back and skidded to a stop. When they looked back, Juan had finished swinging his sword in an upward strike, dragging it across the ground leaving a jagged trench in its wake. When the swing was completed, a blue streak of lightning continued its path forking across the ground towards the two females as it tore the earth apart from the force. "Move!" Shizune yelled as she kicked Akina away, and leapt up just in time to avoid the attack. Akina, though slightly shocked by her sudden movement, recovered quickly and rolled in order to get to her feet. She wasted no time and formed her hand seals. "Katon, Ryoka!" she yelled, releasing multiple fireballs towards the green-clad shinobi. Juan placed his broadsword in front of him and began spinning it with one hand. It got faster and faster, and when the fireballs finally reached him, the speed and wind created by the blade simply dispersed the flames like candle lights. He ended the spin, falling in a defensive stance, grasping the hilt with both hands, the tip of the sword angled towards the floor in front of him. Akina growled, the sound coming out strangely animalistic for a human, before she took out 2 kunai and rushed him. Guan waited for her to be in range before he swung his blade horizontally. She fell flat on her back and skidded across the ground, avoiding the blade and trying to kick his feet out from under him. Guan leapt over her in a cartwheel motion. Akina dug her hands into the soil, stopping herself, and then did a perfect backflip while her back was to him, using just the strength of her arm, in an attempt to kick the Kyuubi swordsman. Guan blocked both her legs above his head with his forearm, and then delivered his own kick, this one headed for the girl's chest since she was upside down. Akina placed her free arm in the way in time for it to take the brunt of the attack still sent her rolling forward, coming to a stop as she slammed harshly into a tree trunk. Guan turned and placed his sword in the way of several senbon Shizun had launched from a hidden device in her sleeve. One look at them, and he could tell they were poisoned. He removed the blade from his field of vision in time to see Shizun's foot before it connected solidly with his face. He fell back and placed his free hand on the ground. He heaved himself up and kicked Shizun in the chest, sending her staggering back and using her to gain enough momentum to backflip to his feet. He then turned, swinging his sword in an arc to his other opponent, who had recovered. Akina used 2 kunai to block the strike as best she could, but was still sent stumbling back. Guan turned again to face Shizun, swinging his sword again. Shizun stepped into the swing, wrapped her arm around his, holding him in place, and delivered a brutal headbutt, knocking the Kyuubi swordsman into a daze just as Akina moved in and stabbed his forearm, making his grip on his sword slacken enough for her to yank it out. Shizun formed a chakra scalpel in her hand and reared it back in preparation to cut the man's heart. Guan recovered from his daze and caught her wrist in time to stop her. He raised his leg and kicked her off of him. Akina held Guan's massive sword with both hands, struggling to even lift the damn thing. The blasted hunk of metal weighed a ton to her. Just why the hell did these bastards have to carry weapons that were so heavy? Shizun spoke to her. You know fire jutsu, right? At Akina's nod she continued. Good, take the sword somewhere and melt it. We can't afford to have him get it back, and you're no good with that heavy thing weighing you down. I'll hold him off. Akina looked like she was ready to protest, but a glare from Shizun made her nod and rush off as fast as she could to get some distance between herself and Guan. Shizun looked back to the large man and took her fighting stance. It was the standard medic taijutsu stance, strong offense when used in conjunction with chakra scalpel, but weak defense. Guan recognized the stance and retaliated by taking his own offensive stance. Do not make me fight you, girl, I do not wish to kill you. Shizun didn't say anything before she formed her hand seals. Dokujiri, she yelled before releasing a huge cloud of poison that blanketed the area. Naruto grunted in pain as his back was slammed against one of the trees. He craned his head to the right just in time to avoid Tsunade's fist, letting it hit the tree and promptly topple it over. Naruto wasted no time and delivered punches to her stomach in rapid succession, followed by an uppercut which snapped the woman's head up, leaving her chest wide open. He reared back his left gauntlet-covered hand, forming a bright sphere of swirling chakra. Tsunade, still dazed by the hits, couldn't properly defend herself before he slammed the Rasengan right into her chest, sending her flying back, spinning with the same motion of the sphere before she hit the floor, skipping over it like a pebble over the surface of a lake before her back slammed harshly against the rock face with a sickening crunch. She fell to the ground on her hands and knees, one arm clutching her chest as she hacked up torrents of blood. She wheezed when she breathed, the sound coming out strained, strangled, and painful. Naruto was almost certain she would die shortly, until the diamond-shaped seal on her forehead pulsed and purple seals formed all around her body. Naruto could hear the bones snapping back into place and hear as organs, flesh, tendons, and tissue repaired itself nearly instantly. The slug Sannin stood, green chakra forming a hazy mist all around her. She placed her hands in a seal and spoke. Initial gate. Kai. As she yelled out the last word, her muscles seemed to expand for a moment before compressing back to their normal size. She then formed another seal, Naruto, knowing that he had to stop this now, before she did any more, drew on the Kyuubi's chakra and rushed forward at incredible speeds. Heel Gate. Kai. Her chakra instantly seemed to replenish itself and go beyond what she had even started with. Naruto unsheathed his blade and pushed wind chakra into it as he cupped his free hand in front of his face mask, his eyes turning red as he began to call on more of the fox's chakra. Life Gate, Kai. Katan, Tsugoku, she yelled, releasing the third gate as Naruto blew out a stream of flames which was immediately combined with the wind chakra in his blade. Her skin turned red and her chakra output nearly quadrupled, her hair whipped around her wildly, undoing itself from its normal pigtails as she dug her fist into the ground and lifted it up, again using the earth as a shield to block out the flames. She leapt away just as the ground she had been using as a shield exploded as Naruto tore through it like rice paper. Two claws of red chakra rushed out of the dust and debris. They grabbed her roughly by the shoulders and began to burn her terribly, only for her to replace herself with a log. Naruto spun around in time to dodge Tsunade's axe kick. He stumbled as the earth shook and gave way beneath him as her foot connected. Tsunade took the opportunity it presented, grabbing him by the collar of his cloak. She reared her fist and punched the blonde Jinchuriki as hard as she possibly could. Pieces of his cloak were torn off and gripped firmly between her fingers as the blonde was sent flying, slamming into the rock face hard enough to have it crumble on top of him in a small landslide. Everything was silent for a moment before Tsunade heard a deep growl as red light could be seen between the cracks of the earth piled over of the Jinchuriki. The very earth began to shake and Tsunade felt a brief moment of fear before she smothered it completely. She rushed forward, intent on killing the boy before he could finish whatever he had planned. She didn't get more than 2 steps before hundreds of red chakra claws exploded from the ground all around her. They rose into the air, going far beyond the trees, before they came crashing down on her like a great tidal wave of bloodlusting power. Tsunade dodged as best she could, using her enhanced speed to help her, but even she couldn't keep up with it, and soon received 3 gashes from her left shoulder to her right hip as one of the claws slashed her. Then another slashed her across her back, then another and another. The slashes healed almost as quickly as they appeared, but they still caused terrible pain even after they were healed. When the chakra claws ceased their slashing, and instead formed into one huge mass which began burning her whole, she did the only thing she could think of. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. A massive cloud of smoke blanketed the entire forest, and the next thing that was seen was a massive slug. Tsunade gasped in relief. Tsunade Heim. The slug spoke, taking in her state. Are you all right? Tsunade didn't have time to answer before another cry was heard. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. Another smoke cloud, this time revealing Manda. The slug seemed to hiss out the name like a cursed poison. Katsuyu. Manda snarled and then looked at his summoner, who stood atop his head, only this time, his cloak was missing from his shoulders, revealing his bright blonde hair as his red eyes glared at the medic with as much contempt as he could muster. 2 flaming red tails of chakra thrashed behind him. Naruto looked to the snake and spoke. I want them in pieces. Manda smirked. He was going to enjoy this. Shizune charged the shinobi. As she got in range, she attempted a spin kick only for Guan to duck under it with ease. She then followed it up with a sweep kick, but he dodged that one as well. She would have attacked again, if the air hadn't left her lungs as the man slammed the back of his fist into her ribs with an air of effortlessness about him. Shizune uncharacteristically cursed before she attempted to backhand him in the face. He caught her fist and twisted her arm behind her back. Shizune craned her neck back to be face to face with the older ninja. Guan barely had time to catch her smirk before Fukumakuchi Hari. The green-clad man screamed and punched her hard in the face as 3 small needles stabbed his left eye. He fell to one knee and held one hand over his eye as it bleeds freely. Shizune smirked, wiping some blood from the corner of her mouth as she stood. Those needles weren't poison due to the danger of having them hidden in her mouth, but they had served their purpose. She moved fast and charged the larger man, coming in with a flurry of kicks and punches. Guan couldn't defend properly due to the fact that his eyes naturally tried to follow her movements, causing him even greater pain as the needles scrapped against the inside of his socket. Shizun then broke through his guard and used chakra scalpel to cut the tendons in his left arm. With a cry of rage, the older man took out a kunai, and with speed brought on by pain and anger he plunged it into her stomach, causing the woman to stop and cough blood. Before she could do anything, he left the kunai in her stomach, and then kicked it in deeper, burying it up to the hilt and making her fall onto her back as she coughed up more blood. Guan again fell to one knee. He took out another kunai and looked at it with his one good eye. He looked momentarily torn before his features hardened. Shizun watched in horrified fascination as the man plunged the kunai into his own eye and cut it out. Blood sprayed everywhere. It fell down the left side of his face freely, caking his beard in the red liquid as it pooled at his feet. She got to her knees and with a forceful pull took out the kunai from her stomach. She groaned as she threw the bloody weapon away, and took deep breaths in an attempt to help concentrate on healing the injury. Guan also took deep breaths as he began tearing off some of his robes and used them as a makeshift bandage to cover his eye. Finally, after almost a minute of regaining his composure, he stood and began walking over to Shizun's prone form, who was almost done with her healing, but not quite finished. He stopped in front of her and stared into her eyes. They held fear, but also determination and anger, both things necessary for a ninja. "Not bad, young one," he admitted before he kicked her. Shizun managed to cross her arms in front of her in time to block the attack, but was still thrown back several feet by the force of his blow. Guan moved to step forward again before something crashed into his side, nearly tackling him to the ground. He regained his bearings in time to see the snarling features of the other girl. He leaned his head to the right, dodging her fist, which held surprising amount of force, before he lifted his leg, placed it on her stomach and chest, and pushed her off. He stood and watched as the girl righted herself in midair and landed, her form hunched over as her hair covered her eyes. He could tell that something had changed about her. Katsuyu's form seemed to bulge for a moment before she released a huge stream of acid towards the snake, hitting it dead on. When the snake's melting form could be seen clearly, it revealed nothing but its shed skin. Manda exploded from the earth behind the slug, wrapping itself around it, only to have Katsuya separate into hundreds of other, smaller slugs and reform out of its grip. As the slugs reformed, Naruto realized Tsunade isn't on her head. He barely turned around in time to see Tsunade's form as she ran up Manda's back, heading straight towards him. He ducked under her fist, then placed his right shoulder against her stomach and grabbed her extended fist with his left hand. He flipped her over his shoulder, sending her clear off Manda's head. He did not, however, expect her to grab his collar and pull him down with her, sending them both spiraling down to the forest floor. Both were snarling as they continued exchange fists and kicks in mid-air. Each block and impact hurt both of them. Such close proximity was burning Tsunade terribly. At this rate her seal of rebirth would only last for about another 2 minutes or so. And each blow Naruto blocked would still break the bones in his arms, only to have them heal in seconds due to the fox's chakra. Only difference between them was that his source of healing was virtually endless, while hers had a limit. He would outlast her, then he would kill her. Not again was the mantra the young blonde-haired girl chanted in her head as exchanged attacks with the Kiri shinobi. She swerved to the left to avoid a downward swing he delivered with his kunai. She extended her left arm and placed it over his neck in a headlock which made him arch back. Then she took her right arm and wrapped it around his extended arm so his elbow was against her rib cage. She then pulled, hoping to break his arm. Guan grunted and grit his teeth as he fought against her hold, then using a burst of chakra he broke free, elbowing her in the stomach and then backhanding her in the face, sending her sprawling. She hit the floor hard but rolled to her feet. She snarled on all fours as she glared at him, and then let her eyes travel to the falling figure of Naruto as he fought with Tsunade. "I won't let you win again," was her silent promise as she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they had changed from her clear blue to a deep crimson red with an animalistic slit. Naruto caught Tsunade's fist and reared his claws back, ready to tear her apart, but suddenly he felt pain, deep burning pain, as if he had unleashed 4 tails of Kyuubi's chakra. The red chakra shivered and seemed to fade for a moment before it exploded everywhere, changing from a focused 2 tails to a hazy cloud of red chakra. Naruto bit back a scream of pain. Tsunade again seized the opportunity and reared back her fist, punching him again and sending him flying down to the earth. He flipped in mid-air and landed on all fours. A massive dust cloud picked up in his wake. He tried to stand but fell to one knee and gripped his stomach, over the area where the seal was. He hissed in pain. Gritting his teeth, he opened a single eye and for the first time in a long time, felt true surprise. There in front of him was the girl Tsunade had called Akina, hunched over like an animal, a single red chakra tail whipping behind her. Above her, the head of a fox formed from the chakra. It looked straight at him, piercing his red eyes with its own before it smiled darkly. Chapter 29, Kyuubi's Deception. Naruto openly stared at the sight. It had to be a trick, some kind of illusion or ninjutsu or something. There was no possible way that he could be seeing this. He moved to stand, but a pulsing pain from the seal on his stomach stopped him. He felt a rush, and when he opened his eyes again, he found himself standing in front of the kitsune's cage, a sight that he hadn't seen in many years. But the sight that greeted him was even more surprising than the view on the outside world. The doors to the seal were open, albeit slightly, but still open nonetheless. Within the cage, Naruto could see a massive pool, or lake of red chakra, as it glowed fiercely. But he couldn't see the fox. Looking for something? Naruto turned and took a step back in true, genuine fear as a red fox the size of a very large horse grinned at him before it lunged forward and bit his shoulder. Naruto closed his eyes, waiting for the pain, but when none came, he opened his eyes, revealing that the fox was actually clamping down on his shoulder, but not injuring him. The fox chuckled at his expression of wariness before it pulled back and began circling him. "Don't worry, fool boy, I cannot harm you, for now at least. How are you out of your prison?" Naruto asked the kitsune, his hand resting on the sword at his side. The Kyuubi smirked, its pearl-white fangs glinting evilly. "That would be your doing, fool boy. Well, you and that girl." Naruto glared at him. "What have you done?" He snarled as his eyes flashed red. The legendary demon smirked. "I have decided to take my leave of this dull, boring place and go into my second prison." "Second prison?" Naruto repeated angrily. The fox sneered at him, placing his face right in front of the blonde. "You did not seriously believe that one lonesome child barely out of his mother's womb could hold my full power back, did you? Don't flatter yourself, boy. That yondaime of yours could never hope to design a seal strong enough to have a child survive receiving my near-limitless chakra. He split your power in two," Naruto said, quickly deducing what the kitsune was getting at. The fox's smile was almost prideful, yet somehow hateful all the same. "That he did, my consciousness and 5 tails of my power into you, and 4 tails into her." Naruto was quiet for a long moment before he snarled and grabbed the kitsune by the front of his throat. Kyuubi growled. At this point he couldn't harm his vessel, but the blonde could apparently harm him. The legendary beast could practically feel Naruto's smirk as he spoke in a smug tone. "It matters not, you cursed creature. From what I can tell, this part of you is just your consciousness and that," he said, jerking his head to the pool of red chakra still within the cage. "Is still your 5 tails of power trapped in the seal. I still have all your strength, so go to her. Go to the foolish girl. I'll be glad to rid the world of both of you." At this the Kyuubi smirked and chuckled, the dark foreboding sound still as chilling as ever. "Ah, but here lies the yondaime's one true folly." He paused as he laughed again. "He designed both seals with the intent that nothing would ever change. But one thing will change now, the location of my conscious mind. Naruto's narrowed eyes could tell he was not going to enjoy this. The Yondaime designed your seal with my self-preservation instincts in mind. He knew that I would not want to die, and so knew that I would always do my best to control the damage my chakra did to your body in order to preserve my own life. However, now that I will no longer be here, your body will experience the full damage the use of my chakra will undoubtedly provide you with. Naruto narrowed his eyes and then tore out the kitsune's throat, only to have him burst into red mist and reform a few feet away. Oh, but Naruto, there is so much more to this. It chuckled. The girl's seal is designed differently, she pulls out less chakra than what you would normally do, but the damage is automatically filtered by her seal, but now, with my entering her seal, I can refine the chakra even further, making it do even less damage than what it used to do to you. She will have my power while you will experience more pain than what you could ever imagine calling just one tail. Naruto glowered at the kitsune, his form shaking in rage as he glared with all the hate he could muster. Kyuubi smirked. Then, when I use her to kill you, the chakra in this seal will automatically seek me out, entering her, and thus killing her, releasing me from her seal, since it was never meant to bind my spirit. While your seal is. Therefore, this seal, not hers, would take me to the afterlife with you. Why did you not know this sooner? You could have easily escaped the seal any time, if this was always the situation. Still so very astute. The Kyuubi smirked. That blasted Sandaime hit her well, so well that not even I could sense her, but when you attacked those Hyuga you two crossed paths, her close proximity to both you and my chakra awoke the chakra I had within her. She has been a beacon ever since, I just needed to wait for her rage to get the better of her. Now then, my boy. He gave a mock bow as his form began to fade. I take my leave of you, he said, chuckling at his enraged eyes. Naruto immediately found himself in the outside world and snarled, his eyes practically glowing crimson before he attempted to suppress the fox's chakra, only for the burning pain around his seal to intensify nearly 10 times over. He realized that the blasted fox did indeed make it easier to control. He grits his teeth and tried as hard as he could to suppress the chakra, barely managing to drop it from 2 taels to a single tael's worth. He groaned but ignored the pain as best he could. He only had 1 tael worth of the fox's chakra, but felt as if he was getting 3 taels worth of pain. He snarled and rolled back his sleeve and saw to his great displeasure, to put it mildly, that damage was being done faster than what it could be healed. He hissed when his metal gauntlets and face mask began to burn. He removed them quickly, letting them drop with a hiss to the grassy floor where they continued to let out smoke. He clutched his head in pain. The chakra fought ravenously against the seal. It held strong, but the pain was almost unbearable. It felt as if his entire body had been dipped in molten steel. He tried to suppress the chakra again, but it fought back with a viciousness he had rarely encountered before with anyone or anything he had faced. Tsunade landed, and looked to her blonde companion in silent shock before she forced herself to snap out of it. She could ask questions later. She turned back to her opponent, who was now getting to his feet. She rushed him, never once hesitating in her stride. Naruto turned at the sound of her footsteps. He ignored the intense pain of the Kyuubi's chakra and got to his feet. He blocked her attacks as best he could, but the pain was impossible to ignore even for him. Tsunade's assault was relentless, but he managed to hold his ground, if just barely. Finally, he found an opening in her assault and unsheathed his last remaining sword and slashed the woman across the stomach. It began to heal, but just then the purple seals that covered her faded and receded back into the diamond on her forehead. She faltered for a moment and Naruto took the opportunity and formed another Rasengan in his hand, but with Kyuubi's chakra interfering he couldn't fully complete the last stage, and instead slammed an imperfect Rasengan into her stomach. Tsunade skidded back several yards before coming to a stop. Numerous lacerations covered her arms, legs, upper torso, all giving a spiral-like design around one gaping hole in her stomach. She fell to her knees and coughed up blood. She gritted her teeth and focused her healing chakra. Naruto moved to attack, but suddenly his chakra flared up. The Kyuubi's chakra had sensed the blood and was now fighting against the seal. It spiked to the point where it would have been the equivalent to 3 taels once more. the haze of red chakra around him was now a massive fog-like cloud. A vicious blood-curdling roar of pain escaped his throat as he fell to his knees in agony. He looked to his uncovered hand and saw the skin practically falling away, revealing muscle and tissue beneath. The chakra was going to kill him before Tsunade could. He tried to stand but only succeeded in getting to one knee. Blood seeped from his mouth, eyes and ears, dripping to the floor. He snarled through his teeth and stood as he glared at Tsunade. The woman panted as her healing was finally done, and looked into his blood-red eyes. Even now, blood-covered and consumed in red chakra as he was, she could see the message in his gaze clearly. I will not fail. You will not stop me. Akina growled as she saw Naruto exchange blows with Tsunade. She rushed forward intent on attacking him as well when a fist hit her right across the jaw, knocking her down to the floor. She rolled once and got back to her feet. She snarled at the now one-eyed man as he took his stance, holding his one good arm in front of him. Your opponent is me. He spoke with a cold hard gaze. She snarled before she rushed him, her clawed hands slashing with animalistic fervor. Her attacks were wild and crazed, her speed had nearly quadrupled from what it was, and the wild nature of her attacks was making it increasingly difficult to block or dodge. Finally she overextended herself and the Kuririn grabbed her wrist before he heaved her over his shoulder and slammed her into the ground. He didn't release his grip and began spinning round and round until he finally released her, tossing her into a tree. As she stood he saw her eyes flash and a faint glow came from beneath her clothing around her stomach before she extended her claw, and the red chakra claw shot out towards him. He was surprised, but managed to swerve out of the way in time to avoid it, only to see the claw sink itself into a tree a few yards behind him. It groaned in protest. He snapped his head back to the girl, but turned it back to the tree and felt his remaining eye go wide as the tree was now coming towards him, the claw dragging it back. He practically dropped to the floor, narrowly avoiding it as it passed overhead. He then rolled to the side just as she slammed the tree down where he was like a giant, bushy club. Inside of her mind her thoughts were slowly shifting, where before her thoughts were of stopping Naruto or Guan from hurting Shizune and Tsunade, now they nearly craved for blood. A sinister voice spoke to her, asking her to give in, to feel the warm blood of her enemies flow through her fingers, and feel it as it ran down her throat. From his new and hopefully temporary residence the Kyuubi smirked. He couldn't give her any more power with the restrictive seal she held, but it was enough for now. Soon he would weaken the seal enough, so she could use all four of the tails she held in her. Then, he would destroy that blasted boy. He formed his hand seals as best he could with his injured arm. It hurt terribly, and only through the use of chakra did he even manage to move it in time. Luckily, his finger muscles worked fine, otherwise he would have been in a lot of trouble. The green-clad man exploded from the ground right in front of her. Her eyes widened for a brief moment before she slashed at him with her free claw. Her claws screeched against his chest armor, the heavy plating managing to deflect the blow if only just. He moved with impressive speeds and before the girl could do much more than scream, he stabbed her 4 times in her upper torso, with one slash across her hip, where her artery was located, and another slash to her left arm, no doubt causing nerve damage. She growled as she fell to her knees, seething as she gritted her teeth. Her blood flowed freely, pooling at her feet before the injuries healed. She let her eyes travel to the man who now stood above her with a kunai raised ready to kill her. She glared defiantly into his remaining eye. Before he could bring his blade down on her, Shizune ran up behind him and locked her arm with his, stopping him cold. Akina's eyes flashed before she delivered an upward swing with her claws, which this time did cut through the armor and left 3 long gashes along his chest. They weren't deep, but they did hurt. He then kicked the blonde girl in the chest, using her to push back and land on top of Shizune. He rolled back, managing to escape her grip, and got to his feet before he kicked her in the ribs, sending her skidding across the ground. He then raised his forearm above his head, blocking Akina's downward strike. He then swerved to the right to avoid her follow-up before he elbowed her in the stomach. She stumbled back and sneered before she rushed him again. Her form little more than a blur of red. Guan took up his fighting stance again, but before the girl reached him a blur of white appeared in front of him, and nailed her right in the face, knocking her down next to Shizune. Guan looked and found that it was the man Naruto had called Jiraiya, one of the Sannin he noted. The silver-haired Sannin's movements were jerky and uncalculated, meaning that he was still recovering from whatever Tsunade had done to him. Jiraiya turned to him. "You deal with Shizune, I'll stop this one." Guan nodded as he eyed the dark-haired woman as she stood. Tsunade grunted in pain as she was thrown harshly against a tree. She couldn't even move before he was upon her, snarling, slashing and kicking. She could barely keep up, and every now and then some of his attacks would get through, covering her in numerous slashes. His attacks before were powerful and refined, a routine he had done numerous times, and it showed. But now his attacks were almost desperate, wild and untamed. He truly looked like the demon many thought him to be. Finally, the woman had enough and elbowed the tree behind her, knocking it down, and leapt back. She took to the trees, Naruto close behind her. She then leapt down and with a flying kick, tore down another tree which she quickly grabbed and used it as a bat, sending Naruto flying back, over the tree tops. The Jinchuriki snarled before he extended his right hand. Snakes came from the sleeve and grabbed one of the overhead branches. He pulled himself back like a slingshot. His left claw reared. Tsunade sighed in relief, but snapped her head up as she heard the breaking of branches and rustling of leaves, just in time to see Naruto explode from the top of the trees, a trail of red chakra behind him. She reared back the tree in her hands and threw it to him like a spear, only to have the blonde extend the snakes in his wrist to pull himself above the tree's path. He ran along the side of the massive projectile before he lunged at her again. She rolled to the side to avoid a claw swipe. It left 3 jagged claw marks on the ground in its wake. She moved to kick him, but the blonde grabbed her leg. He skidded a few inches in the ground, but dug his heels in and took the hit. She gaped at him. She didn't even hear his bones crack, as they had done with the few other times he had been forced to block her hits. He snarled before he twisted her leg harshly, and didn't stop until he heard her scream of anger and pain and the snapping of bones. Tsunade turned and placed her hands on the ground before spinning around completely and kicked the back of the blonde's head, sending him tumbling forward. Naruto snarled as he got to his feet. The slug Sannin had already reset the bone back into place, and was applying her healing chakra on it when he rushed her again. Tsunade waited for him to get close and stood. She used her broken foot, and she kicked him in the throat. The blonde coughed and heaved, but Tsunade took this chance to get some distance between the two of them. He snarled and ran after her, ignoring the pain that shot up his legs from his bones and protesting muscles. His chakra flared up again, nearly making him stumble from his perch, but he caught himself and did his best to ignore the pain. He caught sight of the slug Sannin. Her leg had apparently broken again. He lunged at her, intending on killing her once and for all so he could concentrate on suppressing this wild chakra. But when he had already closed half the distance between them, she turned, the sword he had dropped when his chakra had first flared firmly in her hand. He tried to change his trajectory with his wind chakra, but again the Kyuubi's chakra, combined with the pain, made it near impossible, and he was only able to change his trajectory so that she would run the blade through his right shoulder instead of his heart. His claws flashed before she felt a searing pain against her abdomen. Her blood seeped through his clawed fingers and down his right arm. She was amazed that he could still use it with a sword through his shoulder, but she did her best to avert her eyes from the sight. She reared her fist back and brought it down on his head. Naruto used his other arm to block and felt his knees buckle as her monstrous strength made itself known again. A scream of pain was heard off to the sidelines, and the two immediately snapped their heads in the direction in time to see the last of the Kyuubi's chakra dissipate from around Akina as Jiraiya held his hand against her stomach, apparently having used a 5-point seal. Tsunade cursed as she saw Shizune was losing her fight with the injured Miss Nin badly. One of her arms appeared to be broken, and she was favoring her right leg. She reared her leg back and swung with all her might. Naruto tried to put up a defense, but her attack broke through with ease and nailed him right in the jaw, sending him flying back. "Shizune!" Tsunade called as she ran towards them. The dark-haired medic blew out some more poison gas, making Guan back off to avoid it before she ran, both women heading towards their last comrade. Jiraiya formed his hand seals to form his swamp of the underworld technique. Tsunade, seeing her ex-teammate's intentions, leaned down and picked up a large stone, not even slowing down in her run before she threw it at him. Jiraiya narrowly avoided the attack, but the 2-second diversion was enough for Tsunade to dive for the girl, placing a hand on her shoulder as Shizune gripped Tsunade's other hand. Tsunade and Jiraiya's eyes met. She noticed something. The pervert was holding the last hand seal. She met his eyes again for the briefest of instants, a silent thank you on her lips before they vanished in a swirl of leaves. Jiraiya stared at the spot the three females had vanished for a few seconds before he heard another scream, one of rage and pain. He turned and felt his eyes go wide as he saw Naruto on his knees clutching the seal as red chakra floated all around him. He couldn't see many injuries, but the fact that the boy had screamed at all was cause of worry. Both he and Guan rushed to the boy's side. Jiraiya skidded to a halt next to him. "Naruto, what's wrong?" The blonde grabbed him by the throat as his eyes flashed red. He looked to the silver-haired man and snarled through the pain. "The seal, cut off, the chakra." Jiraiya, knowing now was time to question the boy, pushed him onto his back, cut open his shirt and formed his hand seals. "Gojio Fuin!" he yelled, slamming his seal over the existing one. Immediately the red chakra receded and Naruto visibly relaxed. His entire body was covered in second and third-degree burns. Guan was the one who spoke up. "That chakra the girl used is similar to yours, what happened?" Naruto stood ignoring the pain and spoke. "I will explain later, but first Jiraiya, I need you to fix my seal." "Guan, gather a team, I want those three found. You have 2 days." He spoke before he straightened and began making his way back to the village, promising that the next time he met the slug Sannin or the girl that traveled with her he would take great pleasure in removing their heads from their shoulders. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.